Good day, folks. This is my presentation on markets, faith, ecology, utilitarianism, and the Laudato Si, which is the Pope's encyclical on the environment, a very voluminous document. And in going through that, I realized that there were a lot of commonalities between what us heterodox economists have been saying for a very long time regarding disparity and depletion, poverty and pollution, and what the Pope is pointing out to. And so it doesn't seem like the Catholic Catechism for business is so far off from what we've been proposing in the secular heterodox movement. So this is a presentation to try and clarify and point out the parallels and the mirrors between the two ideas. And it really starts off with utilitarianism, which is just a belief that the moral worth of an action is determined solely by its utility. And it provides happiness or pleasure, meaning that the moral worth of an action is determined only by its outcome. And then Caldor and Hicks go on to further refine the notion to state that an outcome can be considered more efficient if a Pareto optimality can be arranged by sufficient compensation from those that are made better off to those that are made worse off. So in the end, everybody ends up being no worse off than before. So this translates to a principle that requires a few people to suffer for most people to gain so that the overall system is still better off. It also sounds like the perfect justification for an unfettered market, where the pursuit of selfish motives results in everyone winning and no one losing. This expectation that the free market will produce gain for most people while hurting the fewest has become a narcotic. It has dulled the pain of the less fortunate who understand that their misfortune has become a necessary evil for the free market and must be borne for the greater good. However, Stephen Kellman at the Kennedy School argues that utilitarianism is one of the weakest philosophies in the moral ladder. And it cannot be relied upon for making economic decisions, especially when non-market goods like equality, human health, or the environment are involved. So the rote cost and benefit analysis of gains over losses that it can justify wrongly for many of these economic actions. In the utilitarian regime, any actions where the gains of the winners exceed the losses of the losers can be justified regardless of their side effects. So the system gets accepted as one that creates the greatest good for the greatest number and thereby institutionalizing inequality as a necessary condition for overall societal good. So these markets operated by the selfish motive are deemed to be the best route to socially responsible production. And this market fundamentalism promises to improve the lot of the planet's poor. However, what it gives us is greater disparity of income and rising pollution. This happens because large multinationals, we did not anticipate this, large multinationals accumulate disproportionate power, and in doing so are able to rig the rules in their favor, leading to rent-seeking behavior that also favors log rolling of political players in pursuit of exclusions that ensure supranormal profits for a few large players. And the players, however, fail to realize that there can be no market if the buyers have no incomes to participate, and that the increasing disparity could become self-defeating in the end. So free markets generate prosperity for those by serving those who are best able to afford it. They are structured to serve the interests of its richest shareholders by producing high profit luxury goods, not necessities for the poor. So this exosomatic gadgetry for the well-off is also destroying virgin resources beyond sustainable limits. And it is only made possible by machinery that can destroy forests faster than they can regrow and deplete aquifers before they can replenish. Things whose worth cannot be valued, like the environment, are disregarded in a utilitarian analysis, and therefore the market does not prevent their depletion. It does not even consider that these environmental gifts are priceless, even if they have no explicit price, and have come to think that the environment is valueless. The bankruptcy of this kind of thinking leads to the mistreatment of the planet by the market system, which has the inherent tendency to accumulate power in the hands of a few, who then proceed to destroy with monopolistic behavior the very free market that made their size possible. So there is, however, a rapprochement to be made between a market fundamentalism fueled by utilitarianism and the nobility of business that the Pope is promoting, and which has an instrument of a multiplier of human flourishing. So, St. Pope Francis' encyclical observes that technology, like the markets, operate on what is true, while religion is occupied with what is important to life. So, technology needs religion because religion provides the morals that can evaluate the goodness of technology, and a technical progress must be matched by ethical foundation. Otherwise, progress can become dangerous. The problems of science without values is not just derided by religious scholars, but understood by secular economists who decry the same regime of technocratic free market systems based on selfish gain and a margin analysis of profits over cost, without regard to the ecology or the disadvantage. Ethics helps to know what we should do in order to move from what is the case now, which is based on science and technology and utilitarianism, to what the case should be in the future based on morality and ethics. So, the principal way that the Pope has brought this together is through this concept of integral ecology, which required that human beings considered their duties of justice in terms of three relationships: to God, to human beings, and to the earth itself. So he demands that we learn to reject the paradigm of self interest and stop to admire the beauty of creation, not merely as something to be used and abused, but as an integrated ecology that is interdependent and deserves care. The environment, however, gets overused because it is considered costless. But we cannot continue on this path of environmental overuse for very long. In just the last 50 years, the population has doubled, global output has tripled, and energy use per person has grown tenfold. High growth is depleting resources, and a crisis is imminent. This was an alarm that was first sounded by Jay Forrester at MIT in his book World Dynamics in 1973. Forrester recognized that the pressure exerted by the growing planet upon its finite resources would lead to a crisis not unlike the one being experienced right now. We have managed temporarily to defer the crisis by substituting new technologies to improve the productivity of capital and labor. We have come to view growth, with all its ill effects, as a necessary condition for material well being. We think exponential growth is a natural condition and even call it progress. This exponential growth becomes a natural consequence of a free market system, and it unwittingly exacerbates poverty and increases depletion. So each further development of the economy under what the Pope calls the technocratic paradigm generates new products and technological marvels, but only supplies them to the wealthy who also control the financial and political resources in the first place. The technological paradigm that encourages social stratification and inequality. It expresses itself as wasteful consumerism amongst the rich and economic exclusion among the poor. Therefore, it becomes the moral duty of business leaders to focus on the stewardship of the environment rather than leaving it to market forces that often lead to unemployment, destruction of public goods, as well as growing inequality and unfair competition. This rapprochement between planet and profit, creation and trade, between egalitarianism and stratification, between poverty and prosperity, between depletion and repletion, holds tremendous promise for the future of an integral ecology, as argued in Pope Francis' encyclical. But these deductions are not very different from the early teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas, who kind of laid down the guide rails for science as a noble endeavor to help the poor. So it is a practical consequence of perceiving reality through the senses that was allowed only by reason. So Aquinas was, a stout, sturdy man who was very quiet, and in his later years wind up writing volumes in Summa Theologica. And he never ran away from problems. And so his idea was to face frontally. The business of faith was to digest strong meat of the toughest and most pagan philosophies. So here he was finding a way, a rapprochement, or a way to tackle tough problems. And this is no different from economics, where this kind of provides the metaphor for digesting the toughest meat of economics by questioning the purpose of production, which must be to expand health and human flourishing. Aquinas maintained that it was the duty of faith to include reality as a mechanism for understanding God's creation. Since the poor were unable to achieve divine revelation like the educated or the clergy could, the poor had to rely on their senses to perceive creation, and thereby relied upon it for reality and technology and science. This argument opened the doors of faith to let science in as a path to the divine in its own right, and thereby buttressing the cause of science within faith. You could argue that this is why they stopped hanging scientists eventually and making philosophers drink hemlock. But the twin problems of poverty and pollution, which are considered side effects of an expanding free market, and they're even called market failures or byproducts of an efficient trading system. So these are deemed unsolvable by the market, and so they are left alone. And of course, Aquinas is urging us to tackle them. But Hayek also echoes this sentiment, saying that markets are just a system of reciprocity, and they can accomplish any goal if incentivized to achieve it. It can replace depletion with repletion, prosperity with poverty with prosperity. And Ronald Coase and Arthur Pijou also prescribe market remedies to resolve market failures by internalizing externalities. But more is needed. And Pope Francis concludes that it needs a change of heart and values to resolve the twin problems of disparity and depletion. Values that only faith can provide, in his estimation. So the themes of greater service to the poor, the overarching objective of the common good as defined by the well-being of both humans and non-humans, as well as the planet, and the failure of technocratic regime to include externalities in their models of responsible production, are all dominant themes in the Pope's encyclical. So many of the Pope's musings on faith, science, poverty, ecology, and the common good echo the heterodox literature of other economic thinkers. So he recognizes that externalities of disparity and depletion are not just side effects to be resolved, but phenomena embedded within the market mechanism that hinders the common good. So a reconciliation of technology within faith, first championed by Aquinas, makes way for faith to become consistent with the preservation of planet through scientific reasoning itself. So it reverses the ravages of trade to optimize health and happiness throughout the cycle of resource use, from virgin materials to finished goods to the waste heap and back to virgin materials in a cradle to cradle kind of model that turns the very grave into a source for renewal. And that's my topic. Thank you. And I appreciate your attendance.